It's now 9:30, so welcome to this Strategy, Finance and Performance Committee. I will open with karakia. Tua ki ranga, tua ki raro, tua ki roto, tua ki waho, tua tato ti tangata, tua ko papa tu hui nei, tua ko papa ko rangi nei, Mariora, tēnā koutou katoa.
Nice work.
Right.
Yep.
4 councillors on Zoom.
Teams. Yep.
On Teams, yeah, it is Teams, not Zoom. Used to be Zoom, same thing, different technology. So we haven't got too many in the room. Welcome, Deputy Mayor. Nice to see we've got everybody here now. I think there aren't any outsiders that don't know the rules. And I've only got councillors Ferniho, Butler, Walker and Morgan on Zoom, and I think Councillor Greening is joining now. So we've got nearly as many on Teams as we have in the room, but that's okay. And I've got apologies this morning from Councillor Ellis and Mayor King, and I'd also like to note that we've got Board Member Lusk in the room as well. So would someone like to move that those apologies be received? Yeah. Councillor Kirimont, seconded Councillor Hume. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Yeah. Against? Carried. Okay. And the number on Teams probably reflects the weather that's going on around our district today and worse in other parts of the country. So we'll just come to a public forum. We've got Trish Palmer. You've got 5 minutes, Trish. You're a brave lady coming in this morning in that weather today. So over to you, Trish.
Thank you. To be clear, I'm speaking to you in my private capacity, but we'll draw on Community Council secretarial work from the last 2 months for the points I wish to make. Volunteers, a special breed, dedicating a portion of their lifetime lifespan to plant trees, feed families or coach little tuckers. And then there's the committee member, receiving inquiries from their community, researching the matter, then reacting appropriately. Generally, items work their way through over a couple of months before getting put to bed, job done. But some council messaging inspires feelings of futility and helplessness. Number 1, an inquiry raised at a TDCC meeting regarding contractors' practices was referred to council. The response, come back later. Apparently, if the community want change, we need to lobby council during the next round of contract negotiation. Why? Doesn't council have a notebook? And just when is this mystical window? 2, the safety of both pathway exits from Tapawera Village has been raised repeatedly over the years. Recently, discussion and researching the issue resulted in yet another letter to council. The response was prompt. We are currently exploring options for a permanent improvement in both areas which would provide more width and greater protection for path users. The options involve complex land issues that are taking some time to resolve. But the northern section was actually deferred at construction time until the then impending water infrastructure works could be completed, not a land issue in sight. Upon pointing out that fact and asking when the work is programmed for, the answer came in just 2 words in red ink: not programmed. So frustrating. Regarding the Mararewa end, I asked when the last contact was made with the landowners and what was the outcome. Remember, the earlier response had included currently exploring options, along with the promise to endeavour to keep TDCC informed of any updates or developments as they occur. Sounds good. It's clearly being worked on, and we volunteers who care about the safety of our community can relax. Council's got this. But no. Drill down and we learn that as there is no active owner of the land, contact cannot be made. In 2024, the property group publicly notified that they were looking for descendants of the ownership from around 150 years ago. Council spoke to the occupier in September 21, resulting in the trail being formed very close to the road edge as all obvious avenues for agreement had been exhausted. For years, right up until just 4 weeks ago, the community has mistakenly believed through council communication that this issue was still being worked on. As a volunteer putting time and family resources into this matter, I feel frustrated at council's apparent diversion attempts. 3. That giant mammoth, known as the proposed hub, has been a rough ride for our community. A small neutral group of volunteers are working incredibly hard using a helicopter view to restore balance and harmony into the matter. Council's pause vote provided breathing space, time to review and consult. Council messaging that no work is being done, no money being spent, and that the options regarding the project are a blank page until a community has been fully consulted means that the work the team is doing, using personal time and resources, has value and can help bring this thing to a properly consulted and community-driven resolution. Recently, we gathered Tapawera Village facility custodians, all volunteers, for an information sharing evening. What they offer the community, their challenges, aspirations and their facilities' current usage. For the first time, these separate silos were in a room discovering ways to potentially go forward together. The next step is to consult with user groups regarding which of their needs are or are not being met. But now we learn that a council-created business plan will be completed by October. What happened to the blank page? How can a business case be developed when no community consultation process has been agreed, let alone taken place? Am I, and those like me, wasting our time? Who is driving this juggernaut? Recently, I've become acutely aware that we all, including those we love, have an end-of-life date. Yet here I am needing to spend precious volunteer hours drilling down into council messaging to find the true picture. I believe council can communicate with more integrity, regardless of the difficulties of the topic. Volunteers invest so much into our communities. Please be careful of the impacts of council messaging and thus value each and all of our efforts.
Thank you, Trish. I think there's two managers that need to make note of that, and we'll sure get back to you. One is for the Tapawera Hub, which would be John Ridd, and the other is the Transport Manager, which would be Jamie McPherson for the cycle trail. Okay.
But bearing in mind that my main thing is about the messaging. We have
Correct.
to have integrity in the messaging. And don't send me a letter that I immediately have to re-go over, do some more research, and then come back and say, hey guys, that's not true. And then don't send me words in red ink. That's just rude.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much for that. It's a clear
Any
message.
questions?
No, we're beyond time, and we only have questions of clarification, as you know. And I'm sure your local councillor will be in touch with you, as he was this morning.
Thank you. And thank you for your time, guys.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
Good to see you again. All right, we'll just... any declarations of interest this morning? None. Order of business is the same. There's no changes. So we've got confirmation of the minutes of the Strategy, Finance and Performance Committee held on the 18th of June. Would someone like to move that they are true and correct record? No? You? Yep. Councillor Woods, a seconder. Deputy Mayor? Second. So you're having technology problems. So moved Councillor Woods, seconded Deputy Mayor Mauro. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. All right, so we'll move to reports. Mr. Goldingham, you'll be glad you're not Nomaroo this week, because it's a little bit damp in your old patch.
I'll patch too.
Yeah. So, right, asset management policy adoption. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Goldingham, Infrastructure Planning Lead. Here today to look to adopt the asset management policy. I'll take it as read in entirety. Not much to highlight in there from discussions had earlier, probably 3 or 4 months ago, where we did have some discussions on this. There's been small tweaks in light of that, and so seeking your adoption. Happy for any questions.
Councillor Butler, you've got a question?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Michael. I had actually thought that when we had the workshop, the issue of climate change was raised. And in this, the draft that we've got now, it's not actually referenced. And usually in the reports, we have a section which measures a report against climate change. So, and it's not referenced in there. And given that infrastructure, has been highlighted as being one of the significant risks for rainfall intensity, I just think that I'd like to see just a little bit more visibility, because I do understand that, that it can be seen to be implicit in the document, but we just need to show that it just needs more visibility. We need to show that it's been considered, because it is a very important factor, the increased rainfall and events that we are expecting. So it would be good to get your response on that. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thank you for that. And through the chair, we do have it as a principle. It's principle number 4. Sustainable and life cycle based management. Assets will be managed using life cycle approach that considers long-term costs, demand, environmental sustainability, and the impacts of climate change to meet the needs of the current and future generations. Is that what you would consider necessary, or would you like a little bit more?
I think personally, we need a little bit more, and I think it could just be I think it could be a tweak to the policy to just reference it somewhere, or have a separate principle. That would be my thought, because we want to show that we are considering these things.
Yeah, point taken, Councillor. So, it's definitely implicit in many of the different principles. We did used to have 20 principles, and one of the changes we did was to make them less and have a bit more clarity in there. And if we've missed a little bit on that climate change, as said, it is in there 4, but that's not there, we can look to make that a little bit more explicit in there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Right. Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, through the chair. Actually, it was just on that point myself that I would like to see, given that it's implicit, I would like to see a bit more clarity exactly what we mean by climate change, because as has been announced by the Minister, the RCP 8.5 that we've been basing our thing on is no longer. So exactly what are we doing? What?
Yeah, through the chair again, I don't think this is the policy's the place to sort of set down those things. There's other documents in council that this refers to and takes in consideration. And so going to that detail in this thing is not appropriate for a policy as such. That is an asset management one. It's not a climate change policy, it's an asset management policy. So it takes all those aspects, other aspects and policies and strategies of council into account when we look at our asset management works and our documents.
Right. So through the chair, then certainly separating it out to its own heading or whatever would elicit more of an explanation as to exactly what we are referencing and what impact it does have to cost and to planning.
It's just a policy. So. Right. Yeah. Okay. We'll move on, and I'll move. Councillor Greening, you had a question?
Yeah, just a few. Some might be more administrative. Just want to come to page 12, para 14, and I'm just trying to understand here the differences between the levels, the assessed appropriate maturity level, and trying to understand, is the assessment based on the practice comment? I.e. it has to be advanced practice to become intermediate, and if it's intermediate practice, it's core. I'm just trying to get an assessment of why reserves is intermediate and waste management is still core. That's my first question.
Yeah, thank you for that, through the chair. So that was an assessment done by the staff at the time. You'll see that what the current assessment is a little bit less than that for those ones. So we didn't want to make big jumps in our aspiration of asset management practice. If we went from a core or a low basic up to an intermediate, it's quite a big step. And so we want to set ourselves an achievable target of moving from one to the other. Does that explain what that's about?
Kind of, except when I get to page 19, which is in the policy, in fact, a bit further down, sorry. Where am I? Page 19, which is page 4 of 4 of the actual policy. It says, the table below sets out the level of asset planning considered appropriate for each council activity. So is that us deciding that's the appropriate level, or is that based on our assessment?
That's both. We carried out, then we ask you to approve that assessment and say that's the appropriate level of maturity for that particular activity.
Okay, so this maturity level is based on an assessment, not where we want it to be. Is that right?
It's based on assessment of where we want to be.
An assessment of where we want to be, or an assessment of where we are? That's what I'm trying to
Both.
distinguish.
So what we do is, yeah, okay, I understand I understand where you're coming from. So
Yeah.
what we do is we do an assessment. We do two assessments. We do one on where we currently are, what our practice has currently been like over the last few years, and we also do part of that. We also ask the question: where should it be? What level of asset management or practice should we actually be applying to this activity? So we do both. We assess where we are right now and where we want to be. That provides that gap in asset management that we can do improvement plans and work towards that aspiration of that level. So what we said in the policy is where we want to be.
Is where we want to be. So it would be useful to maybe indicate where we want to be and where we currently are. That would be a lot more clearer, actually, in the policy in itself as well, because it's not clear when you get into the policy document. Is this our aspiration or is this our assessment?
It's our aspiration. Yeah, I suppose the assessment will change over time. Like in the 3 years when we go and do it again, it will change. So to set a level of where we are now is not necessarily appropriate in a policy, or we didn't see it as appropriate in a policy. So that's why we've put it in the report for your information to know that where we are now and where we want to go to. But yeah.
Because then, and again, I'm still on page 19. It would be useful in that policy, and again, I'm going to go further up because I think there's some admin things, just for clarity, because it's kind of a policy that should stand by itself as well. When was the internal assessment done? Is that 2023? Is that when it was last done? Because it says here it has been based on a previous assessment completed in 2020.
Yes. So the last external assessment was done in 2020, and then in 2023 an internal one was done again. So This is based on it's a light touch review based on the 2023 one, internal one.
Right. So so we review this every 3 years. So is it 3 years from 2020 or 2023 or 2026 or
2023?
Right. Okay. So it just would be useful to be quite clear in here, because, and again, I do think that in your table it would be useful to go, this is the assessed maturity level, this is our aspiration, this is what we need to do to shift it.
Yes, I see where you're coming from, Councillor. We can do that, fix that wee note there.
Yeah. Okay. So and then in the document itself, and again, we're trying to improve our documentation. I think delegations has been an example of that. Would be useful, again, at the top of the policy document to indicate when it was last reviewed rather than when it's going to be next reviewed. I'm assuming the effective date is the policy date, not the review date, and what version of this it is and where the earlier version is located, or if it has an earlier version number, just so that we know there's versions here.
Yep. Yes, council. We can take that into consideration and add that it's a policy as of a date. So this is
Yeah. So,
Yep.
but it'll be useful to refer to last reviewed. When was it last reviewed, and when is it expected to be reviewed? So you've got your internal review date, 2029. When was it last reviewed? You're saying 2020 was the external assessment, 2023 was the internal assessment, and 2026 is this minor changes, right?
correct.
So is minor changes a review, or is minor changes not a review?
It is a review.
Right. So it would be good to just kind of indicate that, because these are questions that I was left pondering as I read through this document. It just wasn't clear.
Right, have you got any more questions, councillor? You've had about 5, so we're going to keep moving. So
Okay.
one more question,
keep
and
moving.
I'll move to someone else.
No, I'll pause there, but yeah, thanks.
Okay, councillor Kiramont, and I'm looking for a mover and a seconder.
Thank you, through the chair. Page 12, clause 13. It speaks there of refining better reflect the governance role of elected members. So what was the issue? Why do we need to have it better refined?
Thank you for that, through the chair. So I can't quite remember the old wording on it, but I know that it started to get into aspects of that were beyond governance. They were getting into operational type aspects, and we just thought that to tweak that to stay at the governance level.
If I may, through the chair, there will be on occasions when elected members get questions from ratepayers regarding specific. Have I had my 5 minutes? It's all right. When the elected members ask questions about specific projects and things like that, so are you wanting to eliminate those questions from the governance elected members?
Not at all. No, that is not the intent of that.
Well, on page 13, the financial and budgetary implications, it talks about agreed levels of service and funding. And you seem to be limiting what I would have thought would be an open door policy that we've got with the staff that we can freely talk about it. And I hate to get into a situation where someone feels, no, you're going beyond what was stated in the asset management plan. So maybe it could be a bit of clarification there as to where you see the bounds of governance when it comes to specific projects.
So
It has to be budgeted for, so it either has to be in the long-term plan or the annual plan.
Correct, but this is the asset management plan we're talking about here.
This is the policy.
Yeah.
You set the budget in the annual plan and the long-term plan. This is just the policy. So if it's not in a budget, it won't get done. Simple. You've been here before, you know the rules.
I know the rules, I'm just teasing things out.
Okay, councillor Nobel?
Thank you. I see this as a high-level policy, right? And that drives our other asset management plans. And I think to me, it seems relatively clear. The first column says where we are. Second column says where we think we should be going. And the third column says where we thought we should be going 3 years ago. Okay, got that. So we're moving quite a few areas up in the maturity of where we want to go. I assume that will require some resources to get to an intermediate level as opposed to being at core or basic. Have we got any idea as to how many resources, what we need to do in order to get there?
No, we haven't. What I'd say there is it's not just happening overnight. This is a thing that will take some time. It is not necessary for the next 3 years to get to that point. It could be a 10-year process or even a 15-year process to get to that level of maturity. What this does is sets up the improvement plan to get there, and then through that improvement plan and stuff like that, the resourcing inside of it comes in. So to your question, no, I don't have the financials of what it's going to take. What I'd like to think is we're actually already on that journey with the resources that we have, with the data and data-driven decision-making and things like that, with maturity and culture within the organisation of asset management. That in itself helps help us get towards these aspirations.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought that might be the case, and that might be okay. Look, I'm not against better management practices in that regard, but it's sometimes good to understand what is the costs that we need to, what are the resources we have to throw at it, and what are we to gain from it. I am fairly confident that we've got a lot to gain from this, but it would be nice to see that laid out.
Yeah, through the chair again, sorry. Yeah, there's definitely, it's almost like a business case, this type of thing you could do on this and say, rightio, if we did this sort of optimization in this space, if we did this here with our data, if we did this with our leadership, if we did this with that, there'd be absolutely questions that have been asked around this table would be more readily being able to be answered if we got to these levels of maturity. So there will be a cost. There will be a cost down the line, but we'll need to come with you with those costs and make the decision at the time.
All right, Councillor Woods, and then I've got Morgan, and I'm looking for a mover and a second. And we have amended the motion subject to amendments noted in the minutes.
Thank you, through the chair, and happy to move. Just going to the councillor responsibilities, Mike, and we've got a number of items here around demand forecasting, cost-efficient delivery, levels of service, and whether assets should be held or divested. We've got source documents referenced here, the long-term plan, infrastructure strategy, financial strategy, and water services strategy. So when it comes to things like demand forecasting, we've heard a number of different estimates, high growth at the spatial plan or the regional plan, medium to long term in terms of our LTP, and then actual is actually, somewhat lower again, given by our DCs coming in. So where are you taking guidance? Is it just these documents, or are you looking at wider to the regional plan for your demand expectation? When it comes to cost efficiency, are you looking at revenues and costs? When we look at levels of service, are we taking into account policies like the number of parks and reserves we should be holding, or social housing? Where is all that additional direction coming from?
That's a good question. That's all wrapped up in the maturity and the principles and how much optimisation you do. The higher up the levels you go, up to advanced, you do more optimisation, where you bring in a lot more information to make those strategic decisions. At the lower levels, lower level of information is used to actually come up with that demand-driven stuff. So maybe at the basic and the core, you might be just using growth projections and some other basic information, but as you increase in maturity, you bring in other aspects to actually make that more robust, that decision-making. So where are things forever? It depends on the activity, it depends on the information the activity's got to work with. Roading is in a very good space, so they use more of the overall, the higher level strategies and put that into their demand management, their levels of service. But some of those other ones just don't have the capacity or the capability to actually do the optimization part and bring all those other parts together. It's a bit of a journey to get everyone up to that we can all use the same information and bring it all in. But at this stage, we're not there.
So I guess where I'm going with that, I think it's implicit then on the management team that the agenda items in the meetings or the workshops that are leading into the LTP as a founding document, they must cover all elements related to this asset management plan. Otherwise, we're making decisions by virtue of not having addressed it in the LTP. So if it doesn't come up on the agenda, by all accounts, it'll be a status quo, and that will go straight through into the management plan. So it's implicit that anything relevant to changes in the asset management come up in the LTP workshops.
Well, that's not a question. That's just a comment. Right, Councillor Morgan, you had a question?
Yeah, I do have a question through the chair. I can, I understand the policy and how management assessing where they may be at, whether it's basic or advanced. My observation of the probably a very good management report was on the roading, because it gave us an understanding of where the asset life expectancy might be. So I suppose my question around the maturity level and the intermediate comment, I mean, I don't really understand what that statement means. But if you had a life expectancy of your assets along that for the particular asset class, I would have a much better idea. And that's one of the problems with our reporting. So I suppose from a management point of view, are we going to get an update on basically where management are at in regard to the maturity level of the various assets? Because we need to know that. So as it's been said, goes into the LTP. And what's the priority? We are not tracking well with the maintenance and replacement of used assets. And I'm trying to understand from your policy how we get the overall view of the assets within this, what you've written here, so that we've got a good view and we can understand what the priority should be in the LTP. Can you respond to me on that, please?
Yeah, the linkage on that is the practice that we do. So this is not going. The policy itself doesn't look to report on the assets themselves. It doesn't. It says what level of practice we should be doing for that reporting. It says what level of practice we should be doing when we optimize a program, when we provide you a dashboard. That's a clear example that you said that in the roading transport space, they have good dashboards, they have good reporting. That's because they are already at that intermediate level working on advanced. And so that's sort of what exactly the policy is doing. It's actually setting the level of information you get back and the information that goes into decision making. And so the policy setting, like, it'd be great if we put all of them up to advanced, the appropriate maturity level to actually answer all your questions and have an absolutely very robust LTP, water services strategy, would be doing everything at intermediate to advanced. But that's just not, it's not practical, it's not where the organisation's at. And so this policy is doing exactly that. It's setting where we are and where we want to, well, it's setting where we want to be. It's not, the policy doesn't set where we are, where we are is where we are. It sets where we want to be. And so it's not on the assets themselves, it's on the practices that are on the assets. It's the working on the business, this part of it. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that does help through the chair. You've already got good examples of, levels of work that address councillors, questions. So it's a question of the various assets managers getting up to that sort of level. Because we'll only the questioning will continue until we've got clarity on how these assets are being managed.
Right. Deputy Mayor Mara. Oh, the machine doesn't like you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I am happy to second, Mr. Chair, but I just need to be sure what I'm seconding. Because I'm not sure what the amendments in the minutes have been taken. So if they're simply councillor Greening's administrative things about recognising change of versions and tracking those dates, I'm happy to move. I'm not sure the issue was resolved between the climate strengthening or the climate defining. I'm happy if it just sits as it is. So if it's just the minor edits, absolutely happy to move, but I'm looking for some guidance on what the heck we're moving. Maybe I'll ask the mover, what did you move? And then I'll decide if I'm
To
going
me,
to
it's
second
the
it.
minor edits. But we're already recognising climate change in this policy.
So in terms of the climate, we're leaving that statement as it is? Is that? I'm happy with that, so I'm happy to move.
Did you have a question? No.
That was the question.
Right. Good as gold. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, morning. Thank you for that. Whilst I appreciate this is a high level policy and it's full of aspirations, I guess one of my concerns is to optimising our maturity. This all comes at a cost, and I get that the roading example is a good example. I guess my concern is that we can sign off on policy and we can say it could take 10 years to actually get to the level of maturity that you're aiming for, Michael. My concern is, how do we prioritise what comes first to get to that maturity, and what are we going to drop off when we don't have a bucket of resources sitting there because we don't know what the resources are required? So whilst it's high-end policy, there is a process to get to that high end, and I am concerned today about where the resources are coming from and what area meets your priority list sooner than something else, and will we have to drop things off to reach that?
Through the chair there, yeah, good question. So what I was mentioned there before is an improvement plan. Now, the improvement plan is not in the policy, it's in the strategic asset management plan, in the asset management plans. And so that absolutely can come to this table to discuss what are the priorities to lift our game in asset management. Where do you want to lift it? What is it going to take? What resources is it going to take? What financials is going to take? So that's in an implementation plan. So hopefully that helps answer that one.
So just a quick question through you, Chair. Will we get a copy or input into that improvement plan?
I'll take it noted as that you do want it input into it, and I'll see that happens.
Thank you.
As you say, Councillor, all this will come down to the long-term plan and budgets and how much money we've got or haven't got. Right, next I've got Councillor Greening and then Councillor Butler.
Yep. Just a brief follow-up, probably in light of where Councillor Murray was indicating. Could we please be circulated exactly a copy of the updated policy document, so we're actually all in agreement of actually what's been changed and what isn't, so we can provide some feedback if something's been missed.
Yep.
Yeah. So just ideally with changes highlighted, that will help us speed through the document.
Yep, I'm sure that can be done.
Fantastic, thank you.
Councillor Butler?
Yeah, I mean, that's along the same lines. That would be good. And I think, Michael, I think you agreed that, that the climate change aspect has been considered, but left as implicit. So it's not as if we're actually going to be adding something new. We're just going to be giving an optic to something that is already essentially there.
That's correct, Councillor.
Just in terms of Councillor Maru seconding, I think he said that he seconded on the condition that it stayed the same, but there is an agreement that it just can be tweaked. So just some clarity there.
It will be a very minor tweak. We will share it. Council, remember, this is a high-level policy. We're getting down in the weeds. That's what Councillor Kittamon, is this in the weeds or a high level?
Oh, through you, Mr. Chairman, sir, this is very, very high level.
Oh, yeah.
Michael, I like what you're saying about some of the comments about maturing our asset management policies, and I support the direction we're going in. I also comment on what Councillor Walker is saying, is the cost to the organisation to mature, so we're obviously going to balloon out, so just keep an eye on that. But my question is, this is an organisational policy. Do other councils have the same sort of organisational policy clarity? Like, does Nelson have it, Marlborough?
Yes, they do. Yeah, it's one of the standard sort of policies that most, if not all, organisations through New Zealand have.
Thank you, that gives me surety.
Councillor McNamara, quick question.
Yep. So through the chair, it's very high level because this is a very high level document. So when we get to these next lot of documents, they're all going to refer back to the direction that we set here, are they not?
They will in direction. This is not a direction document from what is in the content of the LTPs, water service strategy, the asset management plans. This sets the level and the principles of what go in. It doesn't set what actually goes in. This is not the document that sets your climate change levels. It doesn't set the levels of service. It doesn't set these things. It just says what level. Well, it has the principles and responsibilities, which says that we're going to look at them and we are going to put them in the documents. But it doesn't set those levels. This is not a document that sets in that way of a policy. It's not a policy that sets the levels of these things.
Right. It's a bit more comforting, but even like the Deputy Mayor, I'd be reluctant to approve anything that's going to be adjusted later because I don't think there was an agreement around the table that climate change needed to be different.
All right, Mr. Kirby, and then I'm going to put that we approve this.
As far as Three Waters are concerned, I just want to reaffirm this is an important document. We are going to be upgrading our asset management system for Three Waters, and we are looking to fund that, and you'll find out about that over the next month or so when we go through our GOA information. But the information disclosure that we have to do to the Commerce Commission and to Te Amata Arawai is going to require us to invest a lot more in our asset management and collecting data and putting it together. So we're allowing for the extra costs of that in our budgets going forward.
Yeah. But I understand their regulations are under review in terms of wastewater.
At this point in time, we're based on the information they're required of now. If they review it later, obviously we won't need to spend.
Yeah. Doing some work on that. Deputy Mayor, and then we're going to...
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence. I just need to be really clear for a question to Michael. You're recommending that Clause 4 stays as you've drafted?
Yeah.
Ideally, yes, it does. Yeah. It does explicitly mention there the impacts of climate change and it needs to meet current and future generations.
Thanks, Michael. So just so I'm sure I'm seconding that clause is staying the same, taking into account there's another policy beyond that, taking into account the conversation about it, and the minor changes relate to the version numbers and the administration parts of the form.
That's correct, Deputy Mayor. And look, Mr. Fletcher, I'm happy to put this. This is a high-level policy. The long-term plan and the annual plan is where the rubber hits the road.
Through the chair, look, from what the discussion I've heard two changes which have universal support, which is to the minor referencing at the beginning of the policy that Councillor Greening suggested, and the addition of the current maturity levels in the policy to contrast with the aspirations. And I get so those are the ones we've very clearly heard. I don't think there's any contention about that. And I guess the third possible change is the one you're discussing now, which is around climate change. So it would be useful just to get be really clear on which the first two are in, and the third one I assume is not.
Look, Councillor Green, you've already had two goes, so we're going to put this. We're not changing the.
Just want to make a general. This is one that I've slipped me, but this is in response to the inquiry that went through Parliament on our asset management. And my general question is: does this meet the requirements that responds, I think, to the Attorney General inquiry on our asset management.
I'm not Attorney General.
Is it Attorney General or Ombudsman? Someone did an inquiry. I'm just trying to remember it now, the title of it.
Wasn't that on our rivers?
Could well have been, but I think it was a general comment in relation to asset management, wasn't it?
That's the
I
Auditor
just want to make sure
General's
that
report.
what we are putting in this policy meets that document, which was indicating we needed to lift our game.
This, from my point of view in the drafting this document, this absolutely meets industry standard from industry groups like Apopo and other ones like that. So I haven't directly looked at that letter to see if it's directly applicable, but it is it definitely is in line within industry standards.
Yeah. So my question is, okay, that's great for industry standards, but there was, and maybe the CEO can remind me, or maybe Mr. Kirby can remind me, what the official document, who it's coming from. I thought it was a general inquiry where they were criticising some of our asset management and that we had to lift our game on some parts of that. And I just want to make sure that this high-level document is consistent with the aspirations outlined in that review.
I'll let Mr. Smith comment, but from my recollection, that was specifically on rivers management and assets.
Yeah, through the chairs, just to clarify, that was looking at our management of the rivers, not our asset registers or anything. So it was our performance in delivering our function.
Yeah. So does this high level document, which is seeking to get information, sorry, Dwayne, meet that aspiration? Because if we're going to set it at core, surely it should be more intermediate. If that's what the inquiry was suggesting we need to do, which is lift our game.
Core will meet the obligations.
And through the chair, just to be the audit that occurred there, and Audit New Zealand who audit our asset management plans and the long-term plan process, they do appreciate that that there's a legislative obligation to set the level of maturity you want to basically assess, you undertake your practice at, and they do appreciate that needs to be appropriate to the standard of the organisation, the size of the organisation, the complexity of the asset, and the risks involved. So the fact that in this case here we're wanting to lift our game marginally to a level that's sort of achievable, I'm imagining we'll have actually audit support. What they don't like to see is, and what they would push back on, is a massive leap in lifting asset management practice without supporting resource and resourcing to do so. So I guess I'm just endorsing the approach that Michael and his team have taken here of saying we want to lift our game in a Kaizen type style where we know we can achieve the goals.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that staff have turned their mind to that audit report and have responded to it adequately in this policy document. I'm hearing that has been done.
That's correct. So we will move on. Thank you. So I'm going to put the motion. It's on the board. It's been moved. Councillor Wood, seconded Deputy Mayor Maru. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Michael. We'll move on. James, you're up. And looks like Matt's coming to assist you.
Morning, everyone. I take it you've read the report. Okay. The major points in it is we are compliant with all the aspects of the Treasury policy with two small exceptions. One of them is for the external debt to operating revenue metric. That's the one where when we put in the policy we didn't actually check the wording and it still refers to latest audited results, meaning the previous years, when the intent was to replicate the metric from the LTP. We are comparing to forecast revenue for the year. So the actual forecast one, we're well within that, but under the current wording we're not. The other one is under when we have our maturity profile for borrowing, there's 0 to 3 years, is slightly outside band, but that's a timing issue. During June we did the first lot of pre-funding for next year's maturities, and yeah, we're definitely within band now. We did about $30 million of pre-funding already for next year's maturities. Right, the interest rate markets at the moment are actually looking pretty good. The Reserve Bank has yet again said exactly the same thing. They're predicting small increases in the interest rates, and the wholesale markets, it seems, have finally believed in them, and they've brought their wholesale rates down to kind of, well, I mean, they haven't quite matched the Reserve Bank's forecast, but they're a lot more realistic now. That means it's been a good time for us to borrow. So, hence the pre-funding. Probably the only other point of interest is last Friday, the Crown Irrigation Investments Limited, they finally countersigned the termination deed. So the $7.5 million environmental loan that you guys said we could purchase back from them, that has finally been signed off. We managed to get it at quite a good discount.
Okay, so questions?
Right, do you have any questions, sir?
What interestingly, I made a note that there's a comment in relation to the fuel crisis, and it's you never know what's going to happen going forward, but it's certainly the effect appears to be reduced.
Depending on what regards the effect, the spot price has been dropping as supplies have increased. As the trouble is that the supplies have increased because a lot of governments around the world have released their reserve stocks. So in a lot of countries, the average reserve stocks are down about 40%. So although the world's got petrol, it also means that a lot of countries are now going to spend the next, I don't know how many months, rebuilding those reserves, placing increasing demand. So there's going to be higher demand than there was even before the war at a higher price. So the futures price is still a lot higher than it used to be, even if the spot prices come down.
Okay, Councillor McMurray.
Thank you, through the chair. So I'm just wondering how much money over the last 10 years have we saved by doing interest swaps?
You go.
That's actually, it's kind of hard to know that question, because if you look at it on the face of it, what an actual swap gains or loses, that you can actually work out. But the things that we don't really do swaps for their own sake. We do swaps as part of the getting floating borrowing and swaps instead of getting fixed borrowing. So it'd be a comparison between if the strategy of borrowing floating and then picking the right time for swaps, if that worked out to be better than the fixed alternative at the time.
And further to that, the reason that we take swaps out is around following our treasury management policy. So that's our overriding driver, as opposed to necessarily making money out of it. We have to, for example, in the first year, have 75% of our debt fixed and only 25% floating. That ratio changes further out you go. So some of the decisions we take are to adhere to the actual treasury policy and the risk sort of comfort level that council had in terms of setting that policy. That particular policy will be coming back to council over the next few months for you guys to endorse it again. We get that reviewed by PricewaterhouseCoopers, but it comes back to you ultimately to make sure that you're comfortable with those metrics that we've got embedded in that policy.
So through the chair, is that what you mean in point 14, where you're saying that the current position is still compliant because of forward start swaps which take effect in future years?
If anyone has got the chart in front of you from, I think it's from paragraph 12, that's the chart which shows the corridor. So we have the corridor, we take the debt forecast, and we have a corridor, it gets wider and wider and wider as stuff matures. And the idea is that within that corridor, we have to have a certain amount of fixed. So if you think some of our borrowing is fixed, cool, that makes up the lower part of it. But the upper part of it, which is our floating borrowing, we have to have whatever required percentage of swaps to cover that to be able to meet that corridor. So if you've got, say half your borrowing is fixed and you aim for 75%, well, the other half that's floating would have to have half of that covered to get you to half of that remaining to get you 75%.
through the chair again as well. I mean the whole point of a treasury policy and that fixed versus variable is about de-risking the organisation to interest rate movements, obviously. So the more you have fixed, the more certainty you have in terms of your rates going forward, and you're not exposed to the frailties of the market and what that may do. Obviously, we want to moderate the impact on that so that we can manage rates essentially in terms of their increases.
So when we review this policy, I'll be quite keen to know what it's saving us, these swaps, as to whether we need to adjust our policy somehow.
Certainly that could be a consideration, but I suppose the other side of savings is costing. So the more flexible, the more variable interest rates you have as opposed to fixed, obviously it can go both ways. So the idea of a council is it's very prudent and risk averse and doesn't expose ourselves to movements. That means we do miss out on lower interest rates, just like you as a personal, you take out a mortgage fixed or not all fixed. So that's the thing. So while there is a plus side that we miss out on, there could equally be a downside that we miss on. Certainly in recent years with the increasing interest rates, we've missed out on the downside a lot more. We've had the fixed rate cover, which has meant we haven't been as exposed to what's happened over the last 2 or 3 years. And that's directly attributed to us following the Treasury policy and adhering to that metric that James is alluding to in the report.
And I'm happy to have that conversation when we come to it. But like I say, I'd like a bit more background for the discussion.
So through the chair, can I just add one more thing? I actually asked about this because I initially didn't see the logic of getting floating plus swaps versus getting fixed. And the way I had it explained to me, which mathematically does actually make sense, is that when you do decide whether you're going to go fixed or floating plus a swap, which essentially gets you fixed, at the time, both of them work out to be exactly the same. Otherwise, no one would ever transact them. But when I asked about it, I got told the difference is that when you agree to fixed, you're going to agree to get the price in about 3 or 4 days' time. Whereas when you are doing floating and getting a swap, you can pick your day. So there are slight differences. So interest rates go up, they go down. As Matt said, you could win, you could lose. But if you can pick the time where, okay, I know what it's going to be in the next few hours, as opposed to I'm hoping it'll be right in 3 days' time, that does give you a little bit of flexibility.
Thanks.
You've had 3 questions.
Well, just fleshed out one.
3.
Now you've thrown my train of thought. On the 16 liquidity ratio calculation, does this chart include our liabilities that are counted as assets, like the cash that we've on trust from the community for RFCs, for example?
Through the chair, no. Basically, the liquidity stuff, we're only looking at what really is liquid, so we don't count anything in our debtors ledger. We don't even count the borrower notes that we deposit with the LGFA when we take out borrowings from them. So we're really talking about the really liquid stuff. So term deposits that we could break if we needed to, cash in the bank, that's about it.
Again, through the chair, with RFCs, for example, Councillor McNamara, obviously we've received funds for those. We've received cash, hence the balance of circa $20 million in our RFC account. So certainly RFCs that have been paid to us are part of that position, not future RFCs that we haven't received yet that are planned to occur. Those, of course, are not.
Just to me, it doesn't give the true picture, because that money is allocated. We're holding it, and perhaps we should be holding it almost in a separate account, so that we get a true reflection of where we're at.
The fact that I can tell you what the RFC balance is, i.e. 20 million. I can't say it specifically because it literally changes every day. The way we account at council is through closed account, through activity balances. So we have a system where we actually make sure that we monitor it. But no, we don't keep $20 million sitting in a bank account somewhere. We look at the balance sheet as a whole to get essentially the best bang for the buck, like you would do as an individual potentially.
I understand the process, and I understand that we have our own accounting system where it's all perfectly laid out, but when you present something like this to the public that says our net debt is this, or it's somewhat misleading that there's a liability included in there. It's not spent, but it's on hold for something specific, and it can't be liquid. It's not liquid.
Well, it's even more liquid than that because we've actually received it. So it is cash in the bank. So it is liquid. I suppose again the standard that we use to measure liquidity is not a TDC standard. It's what the Treasury does in all places. If you've got liquid assets, they've got they can be realised in under 12 months, and that's just what it was. Certainly, council has the ability to potentially change that. But again, when you have Standard & Poor's and LGFA looking at it, that's what they're looking at in terms of what liquidity is defined as. You potentially could have another one, but that would certainly add a level of confusion to what we're obligated to report through the essential benchmarks, etc. That all come from the Local Government Act.
All right. Thank you, Councillor. We'll move on. Councillor Greening, you've got a question?
Yeah, just following briefly onto that, following that line of inquiry, but also coming back to another question that I had, just since we're on that topic, Matt. So you're saying that the way we treat our net debt is a reflection of us using accounting standards. That's an accounting standards approach to net debt reporting. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, certainly the definitions are not TDC's definitions. They're definitions from, I can find out exactly what one it is. It's either LGFA, Standard & Poor's, might be the local government, but yeah, it is pretty specific.
Yeah, but I think I understand what Dean is going at, which is we report a net debt figure, but actually there is, I suppose, we're holding their RFCs effectively in trust. It's like a contingent liability that it will be spent. When it is spent is the real issue, I suppose. That's a question of timing. But if it was suddenly spent tomorrow, that would suddenly change our net debt position. And so there is that. There needs to be an awareness when we're talking about net debt that there is this amount of money, which technically, yes, it is supporting our net debt position, but it could very quickly disappear, and there's a risk that then we might, if we spend it all, exceed our net debt, and we just need to, in our reporting, acknowledge that. And I think that's what Councillor McNamara is trying to drive at. So I'll leave that with you. But I'm quite interested just to get more clarity around swaps. I get a lot of questions about swaps from various people, and a number of people have raised concerns about the swaps, and you've probably heard a line of questioning from Councillor McNamara about whether we're actually making savings, and I appreciate it's really a risk mitigation strategy. But can you give us a good idea of what our current coverage is? I know I'm looking at, I think it was para 15 table, which is on page 23. Is that our projected coverage? Because it kind of goes outside the floating and short term. What's our current coverage for swaps? And I'm acknowledging also that in a previous triennium, we were looking to pull back on our swap coverage. I'm just wondering if we still are doing that, or whether it's trying to make sure that all our flexible debt is covered by swaps. So if you could talk to that, that would be great. And then I just had one other question. So that's the first question. And my second question was in relation to the table on cost of borrowing, which is on page 21. It would be more useful if the actual percentage rates were in the left-hand column, because when you total up that left-hand column, it doesn't get to 3.8, it gets to 4 point something or other. I suspect it's because you're using 0.437 and 0.053 to get to 3.827. So I just wonder whether those numbers could be flipped around. Otherwise, someone in the public reading this would go, these numbers don't add up.
Yeah, good point. Maybe we'll do two columns. We have the numbers there to get them relative.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
no, I
sorry.
do see your point though.
Yeah. Okay. And on the swap front?
Yeah, to the second part of your first question, certainly a number of years ago, and it would have been could have even been 5 or 6 years ago, we actually had swaps that were over 100% of the debt that we took out. So we had assumed a spend that didn't actually occur. So for a period until one of those swaps actually matured, we were over fixing our interest rate debt. So we're very much very aware of that and the fact that that's not ideal. So that hasn't occurred and is unlikely to occur going forward. One of the drivers around that is debt predominantly, all but always funds capital spend. So if we have delays in our capital program and we fix some swaps on the assumption that that spend will occur, it came back and bitted us. No, let's stick to accounting. So it came back on us. But yeah, certainly we're aware of that, and we don't get into that same situation. We take a haircut on our debt forecast a little in terms of that capital lag that you would have heard about.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Neubauer.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I just want to...
No, you've had your two questions answered, Councillor. Let's keep moving.
Oh, just after the coverage, I didn't hear a coverage percentage, but what's our coverage?
Through the chair, current coverage at the moment is $128 million of swaps with 25 million of forward starts that don't come in until December this year and April next year.
And as a percentage, what's the coverage of that debt? 100%?
At the moment, the current coverage compared to our floating rate borrowing is about 62%. So, as Matt says, nowhere near the over 100% thing that we were unfortunately stuck with in the past. But at the same time, enough to keep us within that corridor that you see under paragraph 12.
Right.
And can the
Councillor,
paragraphs...
you had an answer. I'm going to move on. No, I'm going to move on. You don't control this meeting. I'm sorry. You get to ask your questions. You've got your answer. Councillor Neubauer.
I've got two questions, if I may. ETS credits. We sold our surplus credits, right? Did we sell them rock bottom?
Through the chair, no. Luckily, you sold them when they're only starting to go down. So last year, the central government made a lot of announcements that had, how to put it politely, that a deflationary effect on the price. Partly it was due to them oversubscribing, so they're giving out a lot of free credits to industries which oversupplied the market. And then they made a lot of announcements saying basically that they were going to unlink the amount of credits from New Zealand's climate responsibilities under the Paris Accord. Basically, they're saying we've put out too many and now we're going to make them worthless. Hence, the price dropped. No, we were lucky in that we sold just at the beginning of that decrease, and then they bottomed out, and then they've risen back up again. So if we do get anyone encumbered, things are back to where they were about a year ago.
Yay. Well, that's lucky. And the other question is around the debt that we're holding. If it's a good time to borrow, and I think I heard you say that, and we still expect the conditions to remain tight globally for a wee while, and I think I heard you say that as well. And we know that we will require debt for quite a while. Why are we holding only such a high proportion of short-term fixed rather than longer-term fixed debt?
Well, it's certain. No, I thought I was going down a liquidity thing. I mean, okay, we won't. Sorry. Why are we holding? Sorry, councillor.
Shall I come again?
Yes, please. Sorry.
Right. I think, if I understand that correctly, we are fairly heavily geared towards short-term debt within, up to 3 years. Would it be wise in the current market conditions to shift that a little bit towards longer-term fixed debt?
Okay, through the chair, the reason we have so much in that short thing, to the point where at the end of May we're actually non-compliant, there's two main reasons for that. One is because we did take out a lot of short, especially fixed-term borrowing on TDC's behalf because of the uncertainty around what was happening with Three Waters. So in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been huge question marks around that, especially over whether we could novate new debt or whether we just have to let it run out. Hence, TDC and pretty much every other council did the same thing of taking as much, shifting stuff towards the shorter end, the 2 to 3 year part. So that's half the explanation. The other half of the explanation is that quite a bit of the pass-through borrowing that TDC does on behalf of Waimea Water Limited, quite a lot of that, the term isn't really set by us. It's set, WWL, they can choose what they want, and since it's the irrigators paying for a large part of that, the irrigators get quite a say in what they would like, and typically they go for short. Unfortunately, since we are doing the pass-through borrowing on their behalf, that takes up quite a big chunk of our short-term band.
Okay, so we'll move on. Councillor Kittermont.
Thank you, through the chair. That was the exact question and the answer that I needed, so no question.
Councillor Woods.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm going to go all the way back to Councillor McNamara's questions around RFCs. And specifically, Matt, you mentioned about keeping these funds liquid because we have actually received them. But at the point the debt headroom goes less than the RFCs, I would argue we've lost that liquidity. You can't go through the debt cap, and you would have to raise rates to recoup that ability to have the RFCs in a position where you could spend it. So I get the fact you're ring fencing it on your books, but at what point would you meet the definition of those funds having been spent?
Through the chair, with the RFCs, we've obviously we have plans like the annual plan that you adopted the other week, and long-term plans. Essentially, that $20 million that we currently have at the end of the current long-term plan, that balance is essentially zero, and that's because you've made decisions about a spend profile, a capital spend profile of using those funds. That spend profile means that 20 million at the end of it becomes zero. Sorry, obviously it becomes zero. So nothing, no RFC money comes off that net debt balance because per your plan, you've spent it. So for me, that's the key. It's a planning tool. So if we spend the capital that we say we're going to spend in that RFC space, then that RFC balance will diminish away to nothing. But when I calculate out what the dynamic net debt cap is, that's part of the calculation, is the fact that there's not going to be any RFCs left after 20 years, or in fact that the 20 million might become 18 million, 15 million, 10 million as you progress over those 10 years. Obviously, the decision around delaying those community facilities recently has meant that the RFC balance will take longer to diminish because we're not going to use what was predominantly using all of that $20 million was the Motueka swimming pool and a couple of other of those facilities to a lesser extent. So that's my answer, but I know we've had this chat before, and I'd welcome a conversation, Councillor Woods, outside of the chambers, just to, because it has come up a lot, and I feel like we're talking at cross purposes perhaps, and perhaps an offline meeting may help.
Thank you, Matt. I'll give it context. Sorry, through the chair. We are increasingly splitting up these costs. We've got a storm recovery levy, $15 million. We've obviously got the RFCs balance, $23 million. We've now got the war costs, which we've specifically rated for 1.5 million or something like that. So if these get folded into the general debt and we take no account of it in our debt headroom, if we go through it and we lose that debt headroom, effectively we've spent that money on other things, even like overhead or other items. We can ring fence it on the books, but if the money's not there, if we've got to go back to the ratepayers and increase rates to get that headroom back, effectively, to my way of understanding it, we've spent it. And even if the war costs didn't account to 1.5 million, or the recovery costs, we've paid back the debt, we should have that ready for the next storm. But if we lose it in the debt headroom, then we've lost it. We don't have that ability to meet the next storm with monies we've already recouped from the ratepayers across that storm recovery levy. You understand what I'm saying? I think as we do these targeted rates, we should be bringing our headroom up, increasing the debt headroom to account for these things, so we've got the money liquid and ready to go. We don't have to rate more to have that ability. It's already in our debt headroom.
Through the chair, those things that you mentioned are in our debt headroom. We planned for them, so they're in our debt headroom. We're not going to have to rate for them for more unless it is more, if it's not in line with our budget expectations. The $14.6 million for the emergency event, for example, if that's higher, then there's an issue, but we'd be coming back to council as part of the next annual LTP saying as much. At the moment, I'd be surprised if they were. Yeah, so we sort of, we make provision by doing budgets to ensure that we don't have to go back to the community to get more rates, because we're aware of all the buckets. That's how the financial system, that's the underlying, I suppose, drivers for our financial model is our current position. And moving forward, it's around planning about what we think will occur with the RFCs, the DCs, whatever it might be.
Right, so you've given an answer. He can talk to you offline, and we have got a question coming back in relation from a workshop or a full council meeting in relation to RFCs from one of your team. Deputy Mayor Murray?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and it's good timing because it follows on for that. And how Matt explained it is how I understand it. So the net debt through the LTP reflects the spending of the RFCs as we spend it. So if we had to spend $20 million today, this financial year, it's not there. It's not in the net debt projection, but in the years preceding in the LTP where it's allocated, the net debt's allowed for that spend to occur without breaching the net debt. But in saying that, I guess there's been a number of requests around just explaining where we are today, and if something else happens, so when we've repaid the emergency fund, do we have an understanding, is it visual to council as to saying, actually, if we have another weather event and we've paid that down, actually, we've got the same ability in our head debt room going forward to absorb another one of those. And I get that, but for me, the important part is spend the $20 million today, absolutely will breach the net debt cap. Spend it where it's programmed in the LTP, the debt room has been provisioned for that, to be within that. It's not a plus, it's absorbed in those current predictions. I'm hoping that will help, but yeah.
Yeah, no, look, that's exactly right. If we were to spend $20 million tomorrow on RFCs, that would be a problem, because we plan to spend that $20 million over 10 years, or I think it is pretty much over 10 years. But bearing in mind that it's not just that $20 million opening balance, we obviously get RFC revenue across the next 10 years based on the growth in the community, etc. So it's going, there's two things happening. It's going up, but in the same breath it's going down.
Thanks for that. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, but I've got one more person with a question. But your Deputy Mayor is happy to move. Councillor Morgan, you've got a question?
Yeah, my question is really on the same discussion, and I agree with Dave and how he views it. the critical thing in my mind, because we've had this discussion and we just had it last week in the Audit and Risk Committee, is whether or not the councillors, we have a fiduciary duty in regard to those particular funds, and therefore it should be transparently accounted for and factored in our net debt calculations. We did ask that question, and I'm not sure what progress we've made on that. Perhaps management can respond.
Through the chairs, I wasn't at that particular meeting, so I wasn't aware of it. I would need to investigate that. A fiduciary duty for mine, you're meaning that we would actually have it in a bank account, and
either in the bank account or accounted for it, so that we're clear in the net debt calculation that it's there.
Yeah.
As I say, we went through it on the whiteboard the other day in the Audit and Risk. It's clear the current practice, but what the question was is, are the councillors meeting their fiduciary in regard to those rateable sums, the DCs, etc., in the way we account for it?
Yeah, well, through the chair, look, we are. Yeah, we are. So I'll say no more. I'll be repeating myself.
Thank you for that. Now, I've got it moved by Deputy Mayor Maurer, seconded Councillor Neubauer. I'm going to put this and then we'll have a break for a quick cup of tea and come back. So we'll put the motion. All those in favour that we receive the report, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll have 10-minute adjournment for a cup of tea and then we'll come back and do the financial report. your seats, we'll get back underway. We'll just, yeah. All right. We've had a tea break. We'll get back underway. Paul, your report, and it will have been read, and I thought there was some slightly better news in it than what we've had before.
Through the chair, thank you. Kia ora koutou, elected members. So just to recap over the report, these are the financial results for the 11 months ended 31 May 2026. I will note that as per the summary, there will be changes to the financial reporting in the new financial year. Also note that 30 June is the end of the financial year, and that will be reported in the annual report. Monthly financial reporting will resume in September, once we are over the end of financial year and all the adjustments there. And in September also will be carryovers and activity balance reporting. So just to highlight on a few key results from the report, net debt was $287 million at the end of May, sorry. After receipt of catch-up funding from NZTA, that was about $15 million. Related to the weather event, I can also advise that the net debt amount that we have drafted at the moment is $298 million, so, and that is under the $305 million budget target. Operating deficit was $11.6 million at the end of May, still impacted obviously by weather event costs. There will be end of year adjustments and the June results to come in there. Balanced budget benchmark continues to track in a narrow range, just under 92%. And capital expenditure, which I believe has had quite a bit of reporting on it, was $53 million, being 55% of the full year budget. The capital program has been previously reported on, and in terms of my reports, I would refer you back to the 7 April report, which listed many of the larger delay items and the reasons for those. So thank you, councillors.
Right, questions of Paul? Councillor Kittermont, you got a question?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman, sir.
Through your chair, what Mike and I were, Councillor Kittermont and I were hand signalling were as just a recognition of the changes that we're making in the financial report. You'll see one of the first tranches in there is around a bit more of a dashboard style. It's not as fancy as some of our friends and other councillors that have much bigger budgets and a much better FMIA system to work with, but we're getting to something that has been fed back to us through Councillor Kittermont and your feedback, and we are doing what we can. We have as Paul has mentioned, we've got a plan of attack on unravelling some of those other requests that have been requested of us.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Green, you've got a question?
Just a couple of questions, and I suppose I'll start off with a general observation, which is para 8, table 2. Thank you very much. That's very useful. Along with that table continue, I just wonder whether it might be also useful as part of the dashboard to maybe have a rolling or 10-year or maybe 20-year profile of those figures to see where our trajectory is. Amongst that would be quite useful. Also just wanted to come down to page 19. Couple of questions there. The JV surplus is down 8.3 million. Just wondering why.
Sorry, I'll just check the paging on that. Councillor Greening, through the chair, sorry. Which paragraph in the report are you referring to?
Oh, let me just get to. I'm looking at page where we are. 30. Where was I? Sorry.
Paragraph or a table would be better. I think there might be slightly different numberings.
Yep. It's page 29 of the agenda, table 3, statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses.
And what specifically, Councillor Greening, was the question in relation to? The JVs, was it?
Yeah, it was a JV. I'm just trying to make sure I've got my note. Yeah, share of JV and associate surplus deficit, and it's showing a deficit of 8.261. This is just above the non-controlled activities, which is showing a 44 million.
Can you see it?
Oh, yes.
On page 29.
Through the chair.
Para 11.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. That item is in our eliminations of non-controllable items. So that those transactions will not occur until the June reporting period. So you'll see those in the annual report along with consolidations and eliminations for joint ventures.
So will that be in the annual report reporting a deficit of 8.2 million?
Through the chair, yes, that's what the plan was. We don't get regular reporting from our JVs. Essentially, that's NRSP. Well, I'm not sure it's called NRSPU now, but the waste and the landfill make up those balances. So when we get those consolidated reports, as Paul alluded to, that balance will be shown in that particular line. Equally, if you look further up, it's actually the offset. There's revenue of 8.8 million and cost of 17 million, with that negative that you're looking at the bottom of the page, just the total of those, the uncontrollable part that we're removing.
So there'll be a note, I assume, on what's driving that?
Oh, completely. So we'd fully expect, essentially, that both those units get audited by Audit New Zealand. Perhaps not, but certainly that's part of Nelson City Council's audit, and then we get the 50% the 50% position comes back to council for us to reflect in our financials. So yes, in due course, you'll see the outcome, and you'll also see commentary if what the budget was that was provided by those business units doesn't meet the actual reality. They'll be explaining what occurred for that to be the case.
Okay, fantastic. Just on the same table, employee-related expenses, 126. I'm assuming over budget to date.
Through the chair, that is under.
Oh, it's under.
Yes.
Sorry, it's not bracketed.
Yes.
It's all right. Okay, so it's under. So, what's driving that? Is it is that unfilled vacancies? What's the driver there?
Through the chair, yes. There are a number of unfilled vacancies, and that is contributing towards that underspend on budget.
So, out of interest, I know we get an update at some point from the CE on FTE count, but it would be interesting to know what our current FTE count is and what our vacancy rate is at the moment.
That'll come to the full council meeting rather than this.
It'll come to full council. Fantastic. That's all I need. Yep, great. I'll follow that up then. And the total at the bottom of the column, all deficit. So currently 2.5 under, and the budget was actually 17 under. So how is this a balanced budget? I know you probably indicated that further up with an orange flag, but what's principally driving that?
Through the chair, as has been reported in the balanced budget workings previously. There are a number of loan-funded operating expenditure items, such as the Digital Innovation Programme, some of the Saxon Field expenditure is also loan-funded, and a number of smaller other ones. This year we also have the weather event expenditure, which is operating expenditure, which is obviously not budgeted for as well, so that will be contributing to our deficit.
So it's mainly interest, debt, increasing debt and interests that's driving that?
Through the chair, that's one part of it, but also we don't fully fund depreciation yet, as we're fully aware of. So obviously that contributes to an unbalanced position. So that and the grants towards capital projects in Nelson are the bigger drivers of the fact that we actually budget to have less or more expenditure than income. Until we start fully funding depreciation, that position will remain and will be part of the metrics that you actually see in the long-term plan as to when we're actually going to achieve having a balanced budget per se.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, I've got Councillor Neubauer.
Thank you very much. And I, at the risk of sounding like a cracked record, I continue to struggle with the format where we receive global aggregated figures, which don't actually show me where the spend has occurred. So, for instance, I can see here we've got a major maintenance expense of 29.6 million. That's above budget. It'd be really helpful to understand where in the district is this being spent, what is the rates revenue that we're actually deriving from those areas, and then we as governance are in a better position to make strategic choices and give strategic direction that may improve our fiscal position. But based on this information, I really struggle to get that information out of there. I know that has been noted through the Audit and Risk Committee as well, that limited visibility as a risk. And I'm just asking, when are we going to address this? And I understand, it's probably more of a long-term plan discussion, but just want to flag it. It is an issue for me.
Through your chair. When we get to the LTP GOA activities for enabling services, we'll be unpacking some of those previous comments around what are some of the constraints and decisions or directions that we would need to be able to answer some of those questions, and it will come with an investment.
All right, Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a question on the staff underspend. Will that likely show up as outside engagement of contractors, or what do we call them?
Through the chair, that line is related to employees, so that'll be an underspend on employee related expenditure.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, does that mean because we haven't got the staff doing the job, we've outsourced? Is that going to increase out there, or is it a genuine saving for us?
Through the chair, that's a wider question I'd have to come back to you on.
Thank you. Through the chair, the 28, the project phasing tool is being developed. I'm kind of interested to know what this tool is, given that we had a revised capital spend to 275 million, which was supposed to be 100% deliverable because we've cut everything we couldn't deliver, and then we still can't meet it. And I was told in 2018 that the problem was phasing, and so we gave the delegations that phasing was able to happen. So I'm just interested to see how what this tool is and how it's going to solve our problem.
The CEO can respond to your other question. I don't think there's been an increase in contractors, but that was what you were asking, wasn't it? Yeah.
Just for clarity, on the 29th of July, I will be bringing to you to a workshop around FTE costs, contractor costs, quite a fulsome report, trends, etc. So that's when you'll be able to have an opportunity to sort of provide input. I also wanted to clarify too, the budget that is in there, we took 1.4 million off of that. In this previous annual plan year, and it's been very tough to try and keep under the budget, but we have managed to do that through managing vacancies and vacancy lag. Where we do have short-term people, we tend to put them on fixed term, and that comes up in the employee-related expenses. And we try and avoid expensive contractors in those spaces. Also, I would like to point out that a lot of the contractors that we do use, the consultants, are quite often technical skills for the capital program, so they wouldn't appear here either. We quite often have to get design from like WSP or etc. So just for clarity, 29th of July is when I'll be bringing a more fulsome report, and you'll have some opportunity to input of what the numbers might be for the LTP.
I thought that would help. So, Paul, you had a reply to the second question?
Thank you, through the Chair. In terms of the capital expenditure prioritisation tool, that is a suite of work which has been ongoing for some time. Previous speaker, Michael Goldingham, who was talking about the asset management and planning. He is better placed to talk on that, and so we've been upgrading prioritisation tools to prioritise and phase the CapEx better over a longer term. So that is my layman's understanding of where they're at.
Mr. Fletcher, did you just want to comment?
Through the Chair, yes, sorry, I was donkey deep in the next report, reading ahead. So the phasing system we haven't yet talked to you about it. We've talked to you that we're at the prioritisation, when we were doing the prioritisation system, that we were implementing a phasing system, and that has actually been completed. ELT were briefed on it last week, sorry, that's why it's quite new. And you did see the results of it, I think, last week when we talked about the prioritisation system and the phasing system and the raw capital versus the phase capital, which saw us all under $75 million per annum. I'll have a chat to Michael at some point and see if we can give you a briefing on the phasing system. It's been done together with the program delivery team and the operations group, so hopefully it ticks all the boxes in terms of being able to make capital delivery more deliverable. One thing it does do effectively is it loads more up front, to make sure that more investigation, design, consenting can occur before we're expected to spend the money on construction, which is still 90% of the dollars. Thank you. Yeah.
Chair, I guess the main issue is that we're rating for work we're not doing.
And through the Chair, through the annual plan, we acknowledge that heading into this annual plan, we still have this current problem. One of the resolutions, I believe it was Councillor Nelbo's, is to bring back a rephased program for this year, which includes all of this. So I think we're still on target to deliver that in the first quarter of this financial year.
But I agree with you, Councillor. But at least it's debt, so it's less debt. But I hate rating for something we don't deliver. We'll move on. Councillor Woods. So
Perfect segue, because my question was similar to the previous question, but more in terms of getting a reconciliation between that total debt and going against our OPEX costs, or the that revenue and expense chart that we've got. I think we've got about $11 million over budget there, but heavy underspend in capital. And so it's just reconciling what our debt position actually is against that underspend in capital, slight overspend in OPEX. And again, just trying to get a handle on where these rates are going, because if we are rating for pipes and tanks and pumps renewals, that's where the money needs to go. We got a really good insight into council efficiencies through the infrastructure guys last week, and this goes straight to the core of that, is determining how much of our ratepayers' money is being consumed by overheads and OPEX, and the primary role of getting those renewals and tanks and pipes and everything else into the ground. So there's a trifecta there. We've got our net debt, we've got our OPEX, we've got an underspend in capital. Just can we put that together and say that we've got that money in hand, we haven't spent it yet, but it hasn't gone sidled off into some other program.
Through the chair, thank you, councillor. I understand where you're coming from with this question. My understanding is that we do an exercise like this at the end of financial year, and as we are comparing operating expenditure through the year, where this year we have some overs there and under expenditure on CapEx. What we do is we do a comparison to budget, and we have a budget figure for OPEX and CapEx, and how that translates into net debt. And we can certainly look at trying to making those compared to budget variances and build them into a reconciliation there end of year.
Yeah, so I guess where I'm going is it's great if we're 20 million under where we thought we'd be in debt, but if we're 40 million under in capital, it's not that flash, and it's just joining the dots on those positions. Thank you.
You'll get it at the end here. Councillor Kittermont.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm also want to just talk a little bit about this project phasing tool. It's essentially a CapEx phasing tool that is used by asset managers all around the world. That sort of is an application like that. We haven't designed it at all, have we?
Yeah, through the chair. Actually, we did get some external help with designing the tool. Matt Thomas is a consultant we use. He's well experienced in finance, economics, and asset management. He was, I don't have all of his credentials, but he was heavily involved in the Christchurch rebuild, for example, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we've sought assistance from that. It's still a bit of a bespoke tool because we apply it to our circumstances, but everybody so far, at least in the operations, program delivery, and asset planning team, have valued its input in terms of phasing. So yeah, it is quite complicated. We'll have to bring it back to you for an info briefing or something.
Okay, look forward to that.
Right, Councillor Morgan.
Couple of questions through the chair. My first one was on the. Firstly, just thank you very much to the financial team. The overview report's getting clearer and clearer, which is good, and good structure. It's improving. My first question is I was trying to, having just talked about our debt and interest rates, is why are we 2 million over in our finance expenses? I'm trying to understand why that would be, since we know what our costs are for the year.
Through the chair. So that is a budget phasing position there. So obviously our financial year didn't quite pan out as we thought it would pan out this year, with weather events disrupting CapEx and other funding, not receiving as many development contributions as we were expecting, and many other factors. I can reassure the councillor that I'm looking at the same number, and I am looking to do more work to rephase that better through the year for a new financial year. There is an impact from joint ventures and other wash-up adjustments at the end of the year, and I'll just draw the councillor's attention to the fact that the net finance expense is, though it is over the year-to-date budget, That budget is heavily loaded into June, and that we are under the full year budget at 11 months.
Okay, thank you. Like Councillor David, I would like to see a reconciliation with our capital and our maintenance overhead expenses myself. So that would be good to see. But just looking at the maintenance, and I know we've had the emergency costs, which are running through at 30 million. So you can see why that would be up. But what I'm trying to understand, and my understanding is that depreciation in our budget is rated. Is my understanding correct?
Some of it, it's not fully funded, but yes, we're working towards funding depreciation, yep.
So what is it? So if it's mostly rated, with the emergency costs, we would be actually significantly underspending our maintenance budget that's from depreciation, from rates. That's what it appears to me. And then if we actually spent that maintenance, on renewals of assets, our surplus number would have flowed through at a much higher number. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, through the chair, you're using different terminology there. Maintenance, renewals are different things. So maintenance is an operating expenditure, renewal is a capital expenditure. Essentially, the theory is if you spend enough on your renewals, your maintenance will not be as high because you won't be reacting to it as we currently are. So Mr. Kirby could speak at length on that, but essentially, yeah, there's two different dynamics there. There's a maintenance cost that's fully funded from rates, and there's a renewal cost that essentially the funding of depreciation is looking to capture money to fund that, simplistically.
Yeah, I thought you might say that, and so some of the words we use, because it's not clear that the definition can be a little bit confusing in that area. I'm personally still confused with it, because I could be looking at maintenance in two ways, as you say, expenditure for the storms, etc., and or renewal of assets. So perhaps we could just try and find a way to be clearer on that, and because it's a considerable sum, the depreciation sum, which is mostly rated, and it should be spent on the renewal of the assets.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Neubauer, and I'm looking for a mover and a seconder.
Yeah, I can move this, but just want to ask a question for my own clarification from the discussion that we've had in the chamber here. There has been comment made that we're waiting for something that we don't deliver with respect to the underspend in our capital project. Now, I understand if we underspend on our capital projects, generally that money comes out of debt, so we haven't taken out that debt. But we anticipated that we would depreciate those assets, and that's why we're rating at the level that we're rating, right? So for $20 million underspend, if we just assume 4% depreciation, I may be wrong there, we would be rating $800,000 more than we actually spend, correct? So if that, no, can you explain that, please?
Through the chair, the capital spend that we have in TDC is generally on long life assets. So you're talking 50 plus years on Three Waters roading. So a $20 million spend on a capital project won't equate to $800,000 of depreciation that you're then funding. Certainly in the interest space, it's much more real in terms of the debt servicing, loan servicing costs associated with taking out debt. yes, if you don't spend what you plan to, you are overrating. However, that position is part of the fact that we didn't spend that gets reflected in our next planning cycle. So while we did it for a while, we overrated, and that ends up sitting in your activity balance for wastewater, let's say, if it's a capital project. The next year you didn't spend it, so the phasing would have been pushed out by our asset management planners, and it would start rating again on the revised date. And that revised date might, it's all the timing issues that you might have with a capital project, etc. But a component of the underspend that we'd have in this organisation is related to not delivering the capital program.
Yeah. So rather than depreciation, the 800,000 on a 20 million underinvestment would be sitting in interest.
And through the chair, with that, again, we err on the side of caution. Obviously, you have a $20 million capital program for a year, you're not going to spend it all on day one. You're going to spend it across the 12 months. So we don't rate for loan servicing the whole $20 million from day one. We assume basically that it happens predominantly towards the last part of the year. It's not as big as you would imagine, obviously, because we don't
I'm
like
just trying to work this through as a theoretical example.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So that does actually confirm that we are rating for something that we aren't delivering. Now, if that is the case, shouldn't we be much closer to a balanced budget than we are, or does that mean we are even less balanced than it looks?
That would mean, yes, we have got more revenue, so it would help our position in theory, but it's not a material number, I would suggest. When you talk about $20 million of loan funding for capital, it pales into insignificance when you talk about the $300 million of actual debt that we know we've got and the interest costs and loan repayments associated with that.
Sorry, it's not insignificant, right? I mean, if we're talking about 20 million, what's the interest rate?
I suppose I talk materiality, I suppose, but no, nothing's insignificant.
Yeah.
True.
Okay, I've got a mover for the motion, Councillor Woods, that we receive it. We've exhausted all the questions. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Kittlemont's happy to second. So I'll put the motion that we received the report, and very good questions. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Excellent. Now we'll move on to our last report in the open. So we've got David and Barbara coming up. This is submissions on the options for reducing emissions from organic waste. And we actually make income out of our organic waste, don't we, through our gas sales. So that's an interesting position to be in. I think Councillor McNamara is on that particular joint committee. Right, over to you. So it's a submission to select committee.
Kia ora. Kia ora koutou. You have received the draft submission that we prepared in response of the government consultation on options to reduce methane emissions by diverting organic waste from landfill in order to improve waste management. We are not speaking, just a piece of information, we're not speaking on behalf of NCC. This is our own submission as Tasman District Council. They've decided not to submit on this, very simply, nothing else but that. And this submission that you have read is aligned with, is entirely aligned, and we've been doing that in coordination with our joint regional landfill business unit. In a nutshell, we do support the government. We do support the government reducing methane emissions from organic waste, and we do support that through practical, cost-effective measures that recognize our regional infrastructure make. We're a very particular type of region here. And with that, we recognize that there are implementation costs that could derive from certain type of decisions, and the need for feasible local solutions. We have made at a high level 5 points. The first point is that we do recognize that organic waste is a resource and it's not just simply waste stream. It's not just waste, but it is really a resource. The second point that we made is that Tasman requires solutions that reflect our diverse communities and our geography. We are quite of a vast type of territory with urban, rural, coastal, remote communities, which means that a single solution, like the one that the government is proposing, might not be really working for us properly. So we need to be realistic on that. The third point that we're making is that, and that's part of our joint waste plan as well, is that we do advocate for resources to be kept in productive use and be used as much as possible for as long as possible, meaning that we actually support the idea of circularity, of the circular economy and moving and not just throwing things directly into the waste. The fourth point that we make is that our position on making investment decision should be prudent, affordable, and should be evidence-based. And this is in alignment with not only with our waste minimization plan, but also with the Auditor General expectation for councils to have evidence-based and financially responsible type of decision making. And then the last point that we make is that we would like to see the government proposing New Zealand, a range of options. And this range of options should be assessed before Tasman District Council has the opportunity to select a preferred approach. In a nutshell, this is the submission that we made. So we do recognize and support the government, but we are advocating for the government to understand that we have a particular make. Hence, and I pass the information to David, we have also undertook the business.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, David, if I recall, last long-term plan, we looked at a organic waste collection or food scraps, and it was just prohibitively expensive for our district and would only work. I think Nelson City looked very closely at it. Did they end up progressing it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the two councils, Nelson and Tasman, we both jointly completed a business case looking into diverting more organics from landfill. That was initially based off the expectation that that would be compulsory. Things changed, but we continued with the business case. Essentially, we've finalised that business case now, and particularly for the wider region, actually, it supported more of an enhanced business status quo rather than providing curbside collection for a number of reasons.
There was a significant cost, if I remember rightly.
That's right. So the estimate was in the order of $120 to $150 per household.
Councillor Butler, you got a question, or are you going to move? We submit this. It's to a select committee.
Yep, I'm happy to move. Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say that the food scraps collection that is mentioned in the submission, which is in Golden Bay. Now, this is a really small scale food scraps collection that is working. They actually, funnily enough, we just need another rubbish bin, which is something we're talking to management about. All that this the business require is just to have an extra rubbish bin around so that people are not putting everything into the food scraps bin. But I just want it to be known that it is possible, and a small scale is the thing. Thanks.
Any other questions? Councillor McNamara?
Thank you. I don't know what page I'm on. This couple of paragraphs. Tasman District Council acknowledges that some proposed interventions to reduce emissions from organic waste may have implications for existing landfill infrastructure, landfill gas utilisation projects and future investment decisions. The Council considers these matters should not prevent progress on organics diversion and emissions reduction, but they should be recognised through appropriate transaction pathways, robust whole of life emission assessments, etc. So the landfill is doing tests to see how much of the gas they're not catching. We think we've got a reasonably high proportion, I haven't heard a figure yet, of the gas captured and reusing it, hopefully fully shortly. And yet these diversion, now I've lost them somewhere, proposals such as, whatever page it was on, yeah. So, no, that's not the right one either. Through home composting and things like that, how much gas does get captured there? So I'm wondering how we are achieving anything. We're not even achieving anything positive, is my point of view, by doing that.
Sure, I'm happy to answer that one. So through the chair, so the business case effectively recognised that we have a really well-functioning landfill in the region, and so it's not a case of any organics to landfill that results in an emission. So in a nutshell, a well-managed landfill's got a part to play. It's not to say you shouldn't try and divert organics from landfill, and to your point, that if you don't manage composting properly, then you'll get more emissions from a poorly managed composting system. So that's what we're trying to say in the submission, that it's not as simplistic as saying landfills are bad and composting is good. That's what we're trying to say, is that you need evidence-based pathways, and that a range of what we've found in our region is a range of different solutions pulled together are going to provide the best overall result for the region, not one particular solution.
I guess my read of it was through the chair that side of it didn't really come through very strongly, that actually by doing these other things you potentially are in a worse position. I mean, absolutely, I agree that if we could reuse stuff before it goes to compost or landfill, that's ultimately a better goal, but if it's going to waste, the landfill is actually in Tasman, or Tasman Nelson, is actually a very efficient way of doing it.
I've got to move it. I'll need a seconder. Do you have your seconder? Right, so seconded Councillor McNamara. So I've got 3 other people with questions. 4 now. Councillor Neubauer.
Thank you. I just want to actually clarify that point that Councillor McNamara has pointed to there. How does home composting compare? I was under the impression that generally composting is an aerobic process, and that doesn't lead to methane. But if it is like in a landfill where it's locked in and no air can actually get to it, then you get methane producing, and that is what we're trying to avoid. So can you just confirm that? Because if that was the case, then obviously home composting would be a better option, because you don't have a methane production in the first place.
So through the chair, yes. So a well-managed or aerobic compost absolutely should produce minimal methane emissions and should produce carbon dioxide and water essentially. But where things become anaerobic, so we're not necessarily talking home composting, we're talking sort of more on the medium scale, but a really poorly managed, pile of material that's not being aerated and rotated, then you can get methane, quite easily get methane emissions from it. So I can't quote the numbers off the top of my head, but certainly it's about good management of composting to make sure it remains aerobic so that you do get CO2 rather than methane emissions.
And to add to what David is saying is that it also support soil health, the health of the soil, and it supports the circular economy type of outcomes. And in the case of the methane in our landfill, it actually powers our hospital. This has made news, around the country. So let's consider the benefit of this kind of the way that it goes back into the landfill.
Yeah, absolutely consider the benefit as long as we capture 100%, but I don't think we do capture 100%. So there is an emission that we release, and that's quite a potent emission, I think, when it comes to climate change. Now, if we wanted to reduce organic waste going to landfills in the first place, and we wanted to boost the uptake of home composting, assuming that it is a good option. Obviously, I don't know if we've got any science around that as to how many of home compost heaps are releasing methane and how many don't, and how that compares to our landfill emissions. But assuming it's a good outcome to do that at home, I understand the cost of green waste bin is prohibitive, and so far we have worked in a policy space where we've encouraged people and helped them to do their home composting. Is there a space, if we wanted to speed up the uptake, to basically say we have a carrot and a stick and say, well, you get a choice, you can either do your home composting or you're on the hook for the very expensive scheme to collect your green waste, and that way we would see a dramatic uptick in reduction of green waste going to the landfill?
Happy to speak to that. So in terms of essentially where we've got to with the business case for the region is that there's no single solution that will assist reduction of emissions. It's going to be a package of different things. It's either encouraging people to do their own composting, potentially supporting commercial services to take organic material, recognising the landfill, when well managed, can certainly capture methane. So it's and the other thing that hasn't been focused on is trying to reduce production of food waste in the first instance. Certainly other members in the past have said, look, and it's a very valid point, is that reducing the waste production in the first place is certainly further up the hierarchy in terms of what we should be trying to do. So, and that's part of the government's proposal, is to try and get a measure of where wastage is being produced across the country, and what part of the processing chain we're getting this food wastage, and what's giving rise to this. It's not just household; it's the whole food production cycle and industry as well. So I guess long story short, there's no single measure that's a silver bullet, is what we've found. There's going to be a range of different things that work for different people and different businesses, different circumstances.
I've got two more people with questions. Some hands have gone up and then come down. Councillor Walker and then Councillor Woodson. We're going to put it, because we've still got the confidential to do, and I'd like to be finished by 4:1.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. I guess we have to be really mindful of the unintended consequences when we embrace doing these submissions, because we are mindful that the business unit makes money. And I guess my question back to both David and Barbara is, how is this measurable? Like, how do you know whether you're going to make a difference? Because when you talk about aerobic composts, they need good management. That's going to require a whole lot of skills and education and resources for our community. And obviously one-stop shop isn't going to be answerable. There's multifacets of what's going to be required. So as much as it's going to be good for the environment, how are we actually going to measure what it costs to implement this to get a benefit from it, if that makes sense?
So I'm happy to start answering for that. I guess just in terms of the submission, the point of the submission and the value for money for the submission is really to highlight the local circumstances of our region. So we work closely with the Landfill Business Unit to highlight practical impacts of the potential changes on both us as a shareholder in the landfill, but also us as a manager of closed landfill. So the intent of the submission is to give local context and make sure that the potential impacts of changes are made known to government. So that's the potential of that. In terms of the actual work program going forward, we do have an ongoing joint process with the City Council and the landfill, measuring what's coming into the landfill and the composition of it. In terms of the work program for organics, we're looking to build one that builds over time, and we do a number of surveys on every 2 years in terms of household behaviour and participation. The intention was that we would grow the program over time and carefully measure the effectiveness, and that might be the participation in home composting, whether they have a green waste bin, measuring what material is going to landfill, and other measures that we have available. So that's the intention, is a slow staged implementation where we measure progress as we go.
Okay, Councillor Woods, and then we'll put the motion in.
Thank you. Actually, my question was quite similar to Trindy's, and just looking at the scope of this work and also any unintended consequences that may apply to the horticulture or agribusiness community. They certainly don't need more compliance just at this stage, and so if we can just, I went through the document, I didn't see specifically anything that would impact the horticulture community, but they are certainly quite large scale composters, and so I think, yeah, if there is anything you see in this document that would impact them, if you could tell us.
No, actually, our orchard community, it's an incredible resource, and we need to think about it as their orchard waste, as an opportunity to create energy around biochar. This is a type of consideration that we are giving, so that we work together and alongside our orchardists, our farmers, whoever is cutting whatever type of waste of that type. And so that's really the idea. That's the idea. And so that it's in this submission, and I think that I believe that it's the approach that we always take. It's not that we are dictating anything. So we actually need to bring alongside sectors, industry, and businesses, clearly, and along as well in terms of organic food waste, our ratepayers. So that's the position of the paper.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, we've got the motion moved. Councillor Butler, seconded Councillor McMurray, to approve the submission and delegates authority for editorial to the group manager. I'm going to put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you for that. Now, we need to move into confidential. The reading's been under Section 48 of the Local Government Act, Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, and I'd like a mover for that because we're going to do the thing. Moved Councillor Hume, seconded Councillor Kittermont. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Aye. Carried. Now, those on Zoom, you have to switch your cameras on and assure us that no one can